Good day, everyone. My name is Graham Blanks, and I'm the Director of Business Operations for Dahlem Software. I'm based out of Orlando, Florida, but today I'm sitting in our offices here in Kael, Germany. I have the pleasure of welcoming you to this webinar as part of the Henry Stewart DAM Continuing Professional Development Room. I am joined today by three colleagues who are seasoned professionals in their respective fields and who have put together some great information that they'll be sharing with us, covering topics from the importance of change management as part of any DAM initiative to a real-world workflow-driven DAM deployment, to a discussion around the current and future expectations that we should all be considering from a DAM technology standpoint. Our three panelists today are Lauren Filson, Digital Technology and Operations from LP Projects in New York; Peter Gunter, Senior Director of Strategic Technology at Splashlight in New York; and Frederick Sanwi, Pre-Sales Solutions Manager at Dahlem Software here in Kael, Germany. Just some quick housekeeping before we dive into the session. Please submit your questions through the webinar panel, and I will direct them to the panelists as we move through the session today. We welcome your questions, and we will do our best to get through all of them. We hope you'll find this webinar informative and thought-provoking. Before I invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves, I would like to take a quick poll from the participants. And this poll is really just to get a sense of people's pain points around the approval cycle for content. And this will give us a little sense of the direction in terms of the questions and the participants. So let's get started, and we'll go through and give the opportunity for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Lauren. Over to you, Lauren.
Great, thanks, Graham. As Graham mentioned, I'm Lauren Filson, and LP Projects is my independent consulting business. Currently, I'm working with the photo agency BFA, based in New York, and in the past, I have worked on two large-scale enterprise DAM deployments, one within an e-commerce company and the other at a nonprofit foundation. So two very opposite worlds, but generally my background comes from the creative departments. And what I found to be the greatest challenge in any of these projects, whether they be DAM or even today where it's more along the lines of enterprise information management, was managing the change that was about to come. And oftentimes I speak to other colleagues and other professionals in the field who do use or do not use DAM currently, and DAM always seems to stem from a single pain point, and it's usually a department that resides a little bit further down the pipeline in a creative process, and you know, DAM seems to be a departmental solution that very quickly expands into the need for something a little bit more enterprise. So, Graham, do you happen to have the slides? I'm still only seeing the poll.
Yeah, I wanted to give everybody an opportunity just to introduce themselves and just briefly give their background before we jump into the slides. So thank you, Lauren. To Peter, maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself and your background.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Gunther. I am the Senior Director of Strategic Technology at Splashlight in New York. I've been with Splashlight for about 6 years, and I had a previous life in the printing business for about 20 years. And I was definitely an early adopter of digital asset management systems. We did, probably from the late 90s and early 2000s, we did some prototype installations for for companies like Reader's Digest, and through our print companies, we did many integrations for many different customers and integrated many different types of workflows using DAM.
Thank you, Peter. And Frederick, please just quickly introduce yourself and your background.
Yeah, so my name is Frederick Samy, so we're working by Daily Software as Pre-Sales Solution Manager. I'm a French guy, but I've got a background, nearly 17, 18 years, starting in early 2000 by Hachette Feedback Image as a DAM manager for the company, and then moving to two agencies working for retailers, also as a DAM manager. And so now by Dalim Software, I try to leverage my experience, the experience of a customer in providing our software and trying to achieve our goal, that is to say, to provide content for customers.
Thank you, Frederick. So back to you, Lauren, and we're going to switch to your presentation. Here's a driving question for you. Given that customers today are consuming unprecedented volumes of content across many devices, platforms, and channels, what do you consider the key challenges and considerations when implementing a DAM system?
Great. And I got a little excited in my introduction. Change management, absolutely. So, again, stemming from the creative department or a creative environment, usually it's a department a little bit further down the pipeline that's struggling, and it's usually the result of compounded redundancies, non-streamlined communication, and then also the need for a variety of channels and outputs. So when you're seeking a solution to an existing problem, generally I try to advise that you look at DAM across the 4 independent focus areas. So the pain points and the struggle usually come from DAM as a business application. And that can mean that there are missing files, multiple copies, versioning issues, nobody knows where the most recent or the best quality asset is. And then also being able to make sure that whenever you are distributing a piece of content or a file or a product across those multiple channels, that all of those items are cohesive as well. So when you start in the creative department, starting with that the most painful area would be the idea of mapping out their workflows and then seeing all of the different touch points as you branch across the business. I generally advise that you sit with your end users and the managers and supervisors of those departments directly, but particularly the end users, because you have the opportunity to sit there, ask them about their jobs, and actually have them walk you through certain tasks to demonstrate where certain inefficiencies may lie or where there is room for improvement. When we're talking about change management, those conversations are really the starting point. And a lot of times companies who are implementing DAM think about change management as something to address whenever the product is being deployed. And that's really when it's most in action, but through your business analysis and through your communications, you really are building the basis and the case for your DAM from both a business process, a technological, and a financial perspective, but then also with the relationships and the trust that you need from your end users as well. Through those conversations, you are also able to calculate those inefficiencies, and a lot of times it comes down to a case of both having a quantitative analysis and a qualitative analysis. So with the quantitative analysis, you're getting into the point where you are measuring the amount of time it takes an individual to do something, and where you could maybe shave a little bit of time off and make their job a bit easier for them. You are potentially in a high volume environment, even getting down to the number of clicks it takes somebody to perform their function. So if you have a department of 20 individuals and they perform a single task several times a day, and it takes them 5 clicks to accomplish that task, if you can get that down to about 2 clicks by using DAM or implementing some different type of platform or software, and you compound that over the course of the year, you can see where your efficiency and your time savings start adding up. And ultimately, that's going to drive you into your financials section. We'll get back to that in just a moment, but moving on from the business application, you have your IT and systems integration area, a much more technical area. And oftentimes the people who are working in the business application area are of a very different mindset of those working within the IT and technology areas. So in the conversations that you have with people, in addition to the work that you're conducting with your IT teams, such as analyzing how much server storage and space is currently being taken by a system, and how much growth and space are advancing over the past couple of years and through the course of the next few years. You will also find certain use cases within business conversations that perhaps the growth on the storage is compounded because of redundancy, and you may even find that there are particular storage areas that your IT team or your technology teams are not really aware of. Dropboxes, Google Drives, and Box accounts are a favorite of those. And then in terms of systems integration, when you're having the conversations with your users on the business application front, you also will unearth certain areas of data that can become very important entry points for the metadata that will be applied to the assets within the DAM. So as you can start to see, all of these areas start kind of intermeshing, integrating, and overlapping. The financial aspects are where you start to really start to resonate with your C-suite, and you're proving your quantitative analysis, you're demonstrating your numbers here, and then at the end of the day, that is really dictating, driving your budget. However, the stories from your users are what will be resonating. Apologies, sorry, there was an interruption here. The stories from your users are really what will drive your points home. And then finally the area of adoption, where you are taking your use cases and the areas of your business application and using that to drive change, using the development of the relationships that you have garnered throughout the entire process, iterating trainings and communication plans, utilizing your human resources team for support. Can we advance to the next slide, please? So, based off the last map, you can see that Enterprise DAM is occasionally an overwhelming area of interconnectedness. But in each of those micro areas underneath the 4 independent focus areas, you could use a methodical approach, also while keeping a personal touch. Your conversations are taking assessments and then defining the actions from those assessments, and also defining what your deliverables may be from those. The assessments are your conversations, your qualitative analysis, your quantitative analysis. The actions that you will take would be the small incremental changes and how those later fold into the larger picture of deploying an enterprise DAM and conducting any integrations with products. And then finally, your deliverables are those that, the final deliverables are those that move to the larger C-suite. and will be your top line bits of information for the project. Always take the approach of synthesizing the cause and effect across the 4 focus areas. Obviously, if you make changes in one area of the business, it will have implications and impact on other areas, so anticipating and being available to communicate across those. Again, back on the quantitative and qualitative analysis, it's always important to be able to capture the figures and the inefficiencies and translate that into dollar figures to help fund your budget. However, the soft benefits approach and the user stories are really what will ground and hit home, and are oftentimes the source of potentially lost revenue or areas where your company can expand. Finally, there is a concept of having DAM stakeholders, who are those that are usually of your higher level management and people who will be involved earlier on in the process. The stakeholders have a good understanding of how their business departments interact with each other as a whole, and will be able to guide through the analysis of their users, will be able to guide the decisions that need to be made in order to implement a system, because many of the systems are not a one-size-fits-all, and they're through different phases of a project. You may have a little bit of give and take on different departments in different areas that stakeholders may oversee that will benefit or not from certain changes. At a certain point in the project, you would typically have a transition or a shift from your stakeholders to what I like to call ambassadors. So your stakeholders are at the higher management level and overseeing how all the parts function together, but when you come to the point of deployment, ambassadors are really the people who are your boots on the ground, who are your power users, who are day in and day out interacting with the system and interacting with their colleagues who are using the system. And you'll be able to identify those ambassadors in your original conversations when we're in the business analysis portion. And oftentimes they're the people that ask a lot of questions, are very thoughtful in responses to how DAM can work for them or improve or change. And so keeping those relationships from beginning to end and really utilizing them to convey your message, facilitate trainings, and report back to you on your wins and challenge points is very important. And in addition to using your ambassadors, keep on measuring your success through the use of surveys. I find that anonymous ones are particularly helpful, especially since at times people can be a little afraid to speak up when they're learning a new product or learning a new process. So if you can craft your surveys in a way that allow for the answers to the questions to relate back to the areas that you were measuring in your original financials, then you have produced a benchmark for your KPIs, KPIs being your key performance indicators. So with the results of those surveys, you can generally show progress with the system or identify areas that are maybe perhaps lacking and require a little further attention.
Thank you, Lauren. Very insightful. I guess there's lots of things to consider when you sort of dive into these sorts of engagements, and we'll come back and follow up with a couple of questions later. So now what I'm going to do is move over to Peter Günther, and for Peter, I have a question. How can an organization optimize its marketing technology stack to enable a globally dispersed team to work more efficiently? And over to you, Peter.
Okay, well, thank you, Graham. And again, I'd like to say I'm honored to be a panelist on this webinar. In order to give you some context to your question, I'd like to give a little background on who Splashlight is and what we do. And this is not shameless promotion. It's more of, because this is more of a case study, and I think it, requires a little bit of context. So Splashlight is a combination of boutique, creative, and photo studio rolled into one. We deliver e-commerce photo solutions for some of the largest retailers in the U.S. And internationally. We have studios in New York, Ohio, Montreal, and Miami. And we have customers and users as far away as India and China. So, the operation here is over 100,000 square feet of studio space. So we are one of the largest service providers in New York City. Let's see if I can advance that slide. Jill, can you? Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about optimization. The optimization of our technology stack took quite a while. I'm going to say it's in its third iteration. We've thrown out a number of DAM systems on their ear because they don't all live up to the same expectations. As a studio, we have very demanding requirements, and we have both the creative and the production environments to consider. So, along with the added complication of multiple diverse locations. So we knew our technology stack had to include at least digital asset management just to meet the centralization and the collaboration challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. But we were also looking for more, particularly in the way of a way to automate processes and standardizing work across customers. This has always been a big challenge for us and for DAM. We use our DAM primarily to connect all of our locations and customers. So the first thing it does is it provides a unified interface for everyone. And more importantly, it provides a unified process for all of the users in that experience. And it lets us define, those two things actually let us define a unified workflow that gives us the studio efficiencies that we really need. Jim, thank you. So here is our main problem. We shoot a lot of volume. On a daily basis, we ingest thousands of frames per set. And we need a lot of freelance help to get this done. It's extremely fast-paced, and without a well-defined workflow, it's extremely prone to error, to say the least. There is so much complication, and it doesn't sound like it, but in a photo shoot, there's an incredible amount of complication. There's samples, there's talent, there's scheduling, there's call sheets, there's models. Just getting everything together to get to the point where you're actually taking frames, is monumental, and then that whole process is incredibly intensive. So our new process is really well defined, and it's backed by a solid DAM workflow. This reduces confusion, chaos on the set, and as a result, it's easier to get things done. So, what are we getting done? Well, our ability to train techs is much easier with a consistent workflow. There's less frustration when we shoot, and as a result of that, we have less freelance turnover. And a really important aspect is we get better overall adoption of the application by the users, which is, as it was pointed out before, that's a very important aspect of using DAM. It has to be a universal adoption. Because our technology stack is comprised of a number of applications, they too are now optimized using REST APIs. So this allows them to work together and share data across a common data pool. So when you have a diverse location, you really have to simplify just for a support's sake. It's very hard to support multiple locations if you have an extremely complicated process. And one of the other things when we talk about optimization in DAM is you need to turn up the bandwidth a little bit, particularly if you're doing the type of volume that a photo studio is doing. Luckily over the past few years, bandwidth has gotten somewhat cheaper, and this is making delivering I/O-intensive applications like digital asset management over a wide area network it's a lot easier. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Okay. So how do we intelligently integrate DAM with other marketing automation technologies? I'm going to say two small acronyms and one rule. The acronyms are BPM, which is Business Process Management, and the other is APIs, which is Application Programming Interface. And the rule is leverage as much upstream data as you possibly can. So we support our customers' upstream marketing efforts as much as we support our own efforts. And we do this through the use of DAM in our own integrated applications. When we talk about integration, we refer to two styles of integration. The first is BPM engineering. So BPM engineering is workflow programming that's internal to the DAM. This involves mapping of manual processes and approvals, in a separate discovery, and then automating them using the native tools within the DAM itself. What can't be achieved through the native tools, we do through additional programming and scripting within the application itself. Another aspect of BPM is leveraging the upstream and local metadata to iterate decisions in the workflow. This is really important because it makes the process dynamic. It's impossible to expect to implement a DAM system across a number of different processes and customers without the ability to have it dynamic. And that adds the flexibility to be able to customize workflows. And if you're, in this situation that we are, where we support multiple clients, it's multi-tenanted, then we need that flexibility. APIs is the second style of integration. So APIs allows us to integrate the DAM with our internal studio applications. So we use our own applications to do things such as manage samples, we plan sets, and we automatically create hierarchy and sync metadata to the DAM. We use the APIs to upload directly from Capture into the DAM. And none of those things would be possible without the use of APIs. So we need both BPM and APIs in our technology stack because they provide us the ability to create that holistic workflow that is super efficient and flexible. If I get to the next slide here, yes, okay. So next I'm going to give an example of how we sped up production using the DAM and other technologies integrated together. And for this one, I'm going to talk about one of our high-end e-commerce customers. So we were able to cut production time for this customer by 66%. So we went from 15 days to a 5-day approval cycle using intelligent digital asset management workflows. The amazing thing is in the process we also managed to improve the level of their photography, which was a result that came purely out of the standardization of the workflow. There are other ways, obviously creative and through technical ability to improve the photos, the quality of photographs, but we actually got a better result from just standardizing the process. So the secret is in the process modifications that come out of leveraging the technologies. Every time we simplify a process, we get a savings and a cost reduction. The systems are just tools, so it's how you use them that really makes a big difference. And so how are we leveraging our technologies? Well, first we're building out project scopes and timelines well in advance of production, and we're using all of that upstream marketing data that we're getting and that we have internally to do that. That lets us set goals and expectations for both the client and the studio. And setting expectations is very important because it aligns everybody in the process. Next, we automated the sample identification and tracking within the studio by adding an internal application to do that. And that replaced a very slow and tedious manual process that was also extremely prone to error. And then we use our planning tools. So our planning tools are used to create projects directly in the dam through the use of those APIs we talked about. And once these projects are created in the dam, all of that upstream metadata is replicated there, again, through the use of those APIs. And then we use that data in the dam to iterate the programming of assignments, notifications, approvals, deliveries, anything that needs an iteration in the workflow, an email, a specific function to a specific group of users is done through that iteration through the metadata. And as a result, we have improved communications, which in itself it saves time and money. So the communication process, changes that happened they happen in a couple ways. So we have the communication of production statuses down to the single asset are now done through real-time status updates. We can now present overall production analytics from our dam to our customers using the performance dashboard, which is what the slide is actually of. And we've dramatically reduced the amount of time it takes to manually gather all of this data and then create all of these different communications. The email, the call, whatever it is, we try to automate as much of that as possible. And when we added it all up, it amounted to like 10 days in the cycle. So we were really pleased about that. Good. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I think actually you
I'm sorry. Oh, are we out of time there? I had one more slide. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Pete. I think we have a few more minutes for you.
Okay, Joe, can you bring it? Okay, great. Oh, there it is. Okay, so the biggest goal for our photographic process is to ensure our clients don't have to worry about it. What we want to do is deliver. So I'd like to talk a little bit about ROI and how we've eliminated some inefficiencies, saved some time and money, employee satisfaction and things of that nature. So having the ability to volume plan and execute in an automated fashion is a huge time saver and resources. It allows people to focus on core executables while not trying to remember, what was the next thing that they had to do in the process. Who do I have to call next? Who do I have to email next? What button do I have to push? In another way, in a more simplified way that we've actually saved is we no longer use paper proofs in any of the markup or approvals. Our system is 100% color accurate on screen, so when you compare those markups to images viewed in Photoshop, they're dead on. The cost savings there is phenomenal, just in FedEx, not to mention the cost of materials and the time savings in not having to calibrate those printers anymore. That was a nightmare. Consistency of our workflow has a really calming effect, which in turn reduces defects. I'm not sure which is a result of which, but the net effect is we have less problems in our jobs. Our talent is a precious commodity, and we want them to be productive, and they are in the digital asset management realm, but we also want them to be happy, and we need our customers to be happy too. So our customers are getting production metrics back from the dam and from our applications, which reassures them that we are performing to their schedules and expectations. Nothing is better and nothing has a better ROI than having a proactively educated customer. So if I needed to summarize the keys to eliminating inefficiency, I would first say remove clutter from your workflows, and then predefine the processes, and then use DAM and other application as the foundation for those processes. Make sure that the processes are built around the automation and that they make sense with the automation, because standardized processes are inherently more efficient, and automation will always make them go faster. And that's that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's very insightful. I think you touched on a lot of the points that Lauren brought up about managing that change management process. I had a quick question about that in terms of, this was a large engagement and a large project with lots of different elements. What did you feel were the most challenging aspects of this change for both your clients and your internal people when they had to move from the old or retired system to this new system?
Well, Graham, all I'm going to say is if you engineer it correctly, they're going to want to move to it because it's going to make the process much simpler. Don't create a process that's overly complicated. Too many screens, too much activity, too much interaction with the system in different places, let's say, is not good. What you want to do is you want to have a very simplified process, and it can be broken out by groups. So, and typically it is. So we have a process for the merch people. They have a process, but it integrates into the setting up of the projects, which then the techs have their own little process that they deal with. Now they're all dealing with the same application, but they may be getting different views, and they're definitely getting different information. So just make sure you engineer that process so that it is acceptable.
Great, thank you, Peter. And we have a question from the audience for Lauren. Lauren, in general, what KPIs are commonly held across all or most of the business industries implementing DAMs?
Oh, that's a really good question. There probably aren't many single KPIs that are applicable to all industries, but if you're looking at it from a creative perspective, a KPI could be the number of touch points that occur on any given content object. So if you have, and we'll use a tangible example for it, if you have a photograph that is going to be distributed to your website through an email marketing campaign and perhaps in a mobile app as well, and it needs to go through 3 different iterations or deviations to get to each of those channels, what a typical KPI could look like is measuring the different touch points between those 3 different channels in manual processes. And then if you are implementing a DAM that has certain functionality or plugins that allow for export to those different types of channels or the reformatting of the asset for those different types of channels, then you would obviously have fewer touch points. So that would be one tangible example, but again, every business environment is drastically different. I don't think that I've ever used a standard set of KPIs between the few projects that I've worked on.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. So now we're going to switch to Frederick Saint-Louis, who's going to give us a little bit of an insight in terms of what he feels are the current and future standards in terms of features and functionality we need to be looking for, expecting from an asset management system.
Yes, thanks, Graham. So it's very interesting, finally, between the reduced power and the customer experience of Splashlight. So it's always great and helpful for a vendor like us to see that what people are expecting for is automation, and we still have also some manual tasks, so it's important in the scope of the DAM 2016 new orchestration, which is the highlight of the next DAM RSC event in New York, to see that people are still frustrating with some manual processes. And so it's true that, in fact, the DAM doesn't have to be just a repository of your organization. It's even more. And we saw with Splashlight that it has to be workload-driven and not simple a task management, because we saw that Splashlight is a couple of steps. And today we need to be able to figure out from the beginning to the end. The reason why, by getting to there, we have 3 main products: Twist, which is able to manage automation, processing files, ES to as a DAM system to share, to manage metadata, and DAI also to manage raw files, to control your files. And just with this short overview of product line, that's what we saw with the experience of BIT. You have to be able to figure out all these challenges. And so now, if you are looking at try to look at the future of a DAM, today's consumers expect deeper interaction across the entire consumer journey with the companies they patronize. So as a result, businesses have increased the use of rich media content such as video, audio, and interactive for engaging consumers. So today, many companies lack a comprehensive digital asset management strategy and processes to effectively leverage content across the business. So now they need to really to save costs, to save ROI, and to find the right solution. And especially early this year, we have a couple of consulting companies who made some survey across the market, and some of them are really interesting and really driven by our subject today. So, as for example, today across all industries, I just highlighted 4 of the main points I just read, and also we get some more feedback of our customers. It's first of all improving the customer experience is really the top reason for increased use of rich media. And the second point will be most companies today have finally mature DAM solutions that don't really focus on the rich media content. And we saw, I can tell you daily that a lot of companies are using drives, sharing networks, or very simple sharing, and of course they can share, but they cannot manage and drive their marketing campaign. So today, the third point is company today struggle to manage this rich media with a technology ecosystem. So this is a big challenge. And of course, one of the least, which is, and that was one of your other points in the DAM Chicago last year. People are also searching for a cloud-based solution to be more agile, and the brand-centric environment demands agile quickly to improve solutions. So what could be the DAM of the future, the DAM of 2012, in fact? So I would like to highlight some of the points. First of all is, as we saw, ready to get to be able to manage rich media content. So today, organizations can no longer think of consumers as passive idols that they try, target, and message to. So consumers now decide how they see, filter, and consumer experiences across thousands of channels. So this is really important. And so we are looking finally to use rich media first of all, to enhance consumer experiences. And so this is important. Consumer expect an interactive, personalized, so this is very important today, and consistent digital experience. So rich media is some of the most engaging and interactive content for consumers today, which is why most of our consumers identify enhancing the consumer experience as their top objective. The next point is we need to create more interactive marketing campaigns. And so when you have multiple kind of media, so pictures, audio, video, you need to synchronize them in the right time, in the same time, from the post-production, from up to your web, up to the CMS. So this is important by organizations today. So rich media plays an important role in sustaining and maintaining current relationships between consumers. So quality experiences with brand will improve loyalty and support an ongoing positive consumer experience. And most of companies say this is a top priority when producing more rich media content. So, so finally, we saw that business sellers impeded an effective use of rich media content today because companies today look to best of DAM solution to improve their rich media content management. So, and with the volume of rich media content, which is expanding today, as said Peter, it can be thousands of pictures to ingest per day. Companies find themselves unprepared to effectively manage their growing libraries of assets. So The second point, and that also we saw in terms of integration, also lack of content accessibility across the organization. So it's important also for any people to be able to retrieve the assets. And one of the last is also lack of structure around the content here today. So for most of companies, they are facing a lack of processes, which is workflow based. So most of them now are still approving images, video, using some manual tasks, and that's what we saw before. It's 26%, so using phone, email, and so on. So centralized DAM solutions creates a single place to manage rich media assets throughout the content lifecycle, from ideation and creation for use and eventually retirement. So my third point now will be about the fact that organizations struggle when rich media content is siloed. So it means that sometimes it's lack of technical skills for supporting integration, and also we saw by Splashlight has to make an integration based on the API between the DAM and their custom development. Difficulty is also managing metadata models. So this is of course definitely important and was on the highlight of the research group last week. Without metadata, it's just a mess. So you need to be able to figure out taxonomy, metadata structure to organize your content. So this company has really to manage multiple taxonomy models due to the different needs of various brands and products. So at the end, what we're talking about is about that for DAM future, DAM solutions enable better consumer experience, definitely. So this is our customer experiences, but it's also the experience we are doing last years. And as we know, DAM is a company which has more than 30 years of background in that industry. So many decision makers looking to implement DAM solutions think that benefits will be more than internal and will in fact directly expand the consumer experience with an rich interactive consumer experience, more consistent brand and messaging, and the last is increase operational efficiency at creation, at approval processes. So, but my conclusion is what is in fact enterprise DAM capabilities must evolve to meet business needs. So it's BPM, it's centralized your assets based on the metadata, based on the workflow, and at the end you need to be able to also manage this content through your content management system. So that's the experience we have by most for the experience of our customer, the experience also I'd also myself as a DAM manager, and also something we try to figure out today for the next DAM future.
Thank you, Frederic. So we'll now, as we come to the close to the end of this session, I'd like to open it up to some questions. But I have a couple of questions for both Lauren and Peter. So here's a question for you, Lauren. The benefits of workflow standardization are obvious. However, the standards must change over time. How are these changes to the standard operating procedures managed?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I want to reflect back on something that Frederic said, and I thought was really profound, that if you engineer something correctly, the changes that are happening and the changes that would be to come in the future are not as challenging. And so in order to be able to anticipate for change in operations, I usually suggest, or even try to myself, select tools and select processes that are flexible. So a lot of times we're looking for kind of a one-stop solution, something to put into place and solve all of our problems. And other times when we're looking to get to that utopia or that ideal state, the challenge of thinking and visualizing of how to get there is pretty overwhelming compared to the practical day-to-day operations within your environment. And so what we do at BFA particularly is we use incremental changes and smaller platforms. We know that we're gathering data in different touch points in different areas, and this can be something as simple as spreadsheets and surveys and forms, but we know that as long as we're capturing that data, that may not be our ideal solution at that point, but if we're capturing it in a thoughtful way that overall touches our operational process and have in mind where we do want to get, we can then anticipate how we move to a more sophisticated solution 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, or a year down the line, and how that data will move and mature and evolve as you move on.
I think we can all agree that the only constant is change. Peter, so I have a question for you from the audience. Realistically, how long did it take for you to go from, I would say, a proof of concept to an initial rollout of your, your system? And then, how long did you feel that process needed to take before you could fully sunset the older system and move all of your work to this new system?
Yeah, so the previous system was not as complicated. So we did run the previous system in tandem with the new system. The new system did require it did require a lot of work, but I'd say we had it up in production in 90 days from the time that we did installation, because we had planned, obviously to be trained. There was a lot of training that was involved, and we did purchase some integration support to help us. It was a new system, although I've had experience with this product, but other iterations of it in the previous states. So we did use integrator. We did get a lot of training, and we did some discovery. And I'd say 90 days till it was actually rolled out. But it probably took a little bit longer. It probably took an additional 90 days before we were comfortable. Comfortable with really, before the users started to become comfortable with it, and that's an ongoing process too. So, as both Lauren and Frederick, had said, change happens. So basically, we'll roll out a workflow, and then customers and users will use it for a while, and then they'll say, oh, wait a minute, this needs to happen, but we kind of wanted this here, and this is too complicated here, we need to get rid of this. So it's, that initial rollout, 90 days, and then another 90 days of working with it and tweaking it. But, it is a commitment. It's something you don't want to, plan to do in a weekend.
So, I mean, when you look at what you have currently running into production, is it markedly different from your original vision that you looked at in terms of moving to this new system, or was the evolution more of a slow change as you brought more people on board and you started to see opportunities to improve areas of the workflow or the asset management system?
Yeah, some of it was organic and some of it was planned. So a number of the internal applications were already planned. The integration, it took a little bit of time, and as we roll out new applications, we're changing the way we integrate. So we're constantly improving it. It's never static. It's always the process is being improved, and how we integrate with it is always being improved.
So, one of the questions that's come up from the audience is, how big is your team? Obviously you've leaned on system integrators and the vendor to help out where you felt it was appropriate, but in terms of the team that you put together to be able to do the initial deployment and continue to develop and evolve the system, how big is that team? And what's the sort of the makeup of those individuals?
Sure. Well, we have, specific to the DAM implementation, we have a DevOps developer, a very high-level DevOps developer, extremely talented, and we also have a BPM engineer which is, that's a big responsibility. That person is building workflows and doing support on the system, because there's a lot of support that you need to do once you roll out a DAM. You can't roll it out and walk away from it, close the door. It needs constant care and feeding. So we have that there, and then on the integration side, we have another 2 developers that work specifically on integrating the studio apps and the asset management system. And then there's myself. I provide, some of the vision and some of the project management and so on and so forth.
Right, Lauren. Similar question to you. What's your experience been with the teams that get pulled together for projects like this, where there's an amount of integration, there's a number of different stakeholders involved? What do you see as typically the team that would be pulled together to have a successful DAM deployment?
So I think that, obviously, yeah, and this is coming from a creative environment again, each of the functions within your creative department needs to have a representative, and it can be challenging because perhaps some of the areas of the creative department don't have a direct interaction with the product themselves, or they would be considered not power users but more consumers of the product. I would make sure to have an even representation to really encourage the leaders within each of those different functions within the creative department to participate. Just because if you have kind of only viewed a department as a consumer, or kind of skipped over the level of importance that may impact a department, you'll find yourself with much more difficult challenges down the line. Obviously, you do need to have the full support of your IT department and also your technology teams, if your technology team sits separately from that. So having a very solid project manager that is a technical counterpart to a project manager like myself, who normally resides in the creative end, is incredibly helpful because the project managers on both the technical and the creative sides can typically find a common language for one another and understand how to balance when you don't want to, or you can't risk letting go of the vision of streamlining the process on the creative side for something that may be a rather large technological challenge. And then at the end of the day, getting the strong backing of your CTO from the technology side, and also your CFO is your best friend on a project like this. These are very expensive endeavors, not only for the purchase of the software is involved and the time spent integrating it, but as Frederick mentioned, this is an ongoing labor of love and a project that needs to be constantly fed and supported, so there are ongoing costs to it as well. What you want your CFO to fully realize is not just what the financial implications are today or to this year's budget, but how those changes will compound over time, and then also how the improvements that your system will gain for you through resolving inefficiencies or opening new revenue streams for your company will continue to fund the future of the project as well.
All right, thank you very much, Lauren. We're almost out of time, and just before we conclude, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Lauren, Peter, and Frederick for their contribution and taking the time today to share their thoughts and ideas, and hopefully the audience found it informative and thought-provoking. Just as another quick reminder, the Henry Stewart DAM New York event is the first week of May, and I hope that many of the people participating in this webinar today will be attending that event, and we look forward to chatting to you guys in more detail. And that concludes the webinar. I think we're out of time, and thank you and have a good day.